our very dynamic and full of enthusiasm Professor, Dr. Presley De Vera. And to you, my fellow classmates, a pleasant morning to each of you. Please spare a little of your time to listen to my short discussion on language as a system of structural patterns. This is a short discussion to Saussure's structural linguistics and central concepts. Ferdinand de Saussure is a Swiss linguist credited in founding the field of structural linguistics, a radical new theory of language structures system. He is often referred to as the father of modern linguistics, an honor divided between Noam Chomsky and him, if you will ask. His most influential work course in general linguistics was published posthumously in 1916. But what is structural linguistics? It is the idea that language is a system of contrasts and equivalents. Structural linguistics. Language consists strings of linguistic objects such as words, phonemes, and morphemes. These subjects to define only to the fact that they contrast other objects in the language system. This is an entirely new way of thinking about languages and present radical change from previous approaches. In order to begin to understand structural linguistics, we first need to understand the key ideas. First is the sign. Saussure's sign consists of the signifier and the signified. The signifier is the sound to the letters used to know what we're talking about. Signified is the actual concept to the thing, that is the idea in your mind on what you hear or read. The signifier, the actual real thing in the world, is called the referent. Note on the difference between the thought of the cat and the actual real cat. The sign is a two-sided psychological entity, as one can exist without the other. It just couldn't be a sign. Imagine a coin with just one side. You can't, right? Secondly, Saussure highlighted that there is an arbitrary and conventional relationship between signifier and signify. Arbitrary because there is no actual reason why we call a cat, and that's why different languages have different words with the same theme. The convention of language refers to the idea that speech community needs to adhere to the same connections between signifier and signify. For example, English speakers share a very simple concept of a cat. When they hear that word, they can't just start calling a cat a dog and expect anyone to know what I'm talking about. Thirdly, Saussure distinguishes between the use of language, parole, and the system of language, lang. Lang speaks about the system of language such as syntax or phonology. It is an abstract system. Parole, on the other hand, is the use of the language, and this is an individual matter. Have you noticed that people have their own language codes? Well, this is the individual side, the actual use of language. Fourthly, Saussure distinguishes between synchrony and diachrony. Synchrony refers to the complete language system in just one point in time. Think about a snapshot of language. Diachrony, on the other hand, is how the language develops over time, and this is also known as historical linguistics. You may have noticed changes in language in your lifetime on different words appearing or disappearing, or slight translation change, that is diachrony. The fifth and final, however, is the paradigm and syntime. They represent two axes used to describe languages. The syntime is the linear pattern or sequence of linguistic objects. For example, the words in the sentence, "The cat sat on the mat." It can also be the sounds in a word, for example, clay. This axis is essentially one contrast. You can't swap words surrounding the sentence without scrambling meaning, and likewise, you can't swap the letters in clay around without destroying the arbitrary connections between the signifier and the signified. The paradigm refers to a group of linguistic objects which have similarities and that can replace one another in syntime. Take the early syntime, "The cat sat on the mat." You can replace cat with dog or baby. But in this particular syntime, you can't just use a word like fish, but in different syntime, they could be used to replace cat. For example, in the syntime, I like all animals, especially fish. Just because some objects have a paradigmatic relationship in one specific scene time doesn't mean that it holds all the whole context. Let's look at another example using the sounds in the word clay. In this syntagm, simply replace C with P to produce play. But we can't replace the C with a T. English doesn't allow TL sequence. Another syntagm, still. Here you can replace the T with a P to produce the syntagm, spill. The T and the P belong to the same paradigm in this example. The axis of the syntagm, that paradigm, is a key to understanding what Saussure means when you talk about the meaning depending on the systems of the language. So why is it that any of this is interesting? While Saussure started forming his ideas about language, the study of language is likely, you will believe. Saussure stressed that language is structural, thereby freeing it from association, be they social, cultural, political, historical. Practically, this approach to language means that it's a study based on structural relations alone. Linguistic object meanings understood through its contrast on other linguistic objects in the system. Language is therefore a static system based on interconnected linguistic objects.